no. We're not talking about that beat today. And we're not talking about that generation or K-pop at all. Try something more like...
They call you Beat Generation.
Yep, lots and lots of jazz. Hello there, my name is Victoria Tran, and today you and I will explore the core values and issues of this revolutionary movement in history known as the Beat Generation. Enjoy! The Beat Generation was a significant literary movement in history where American writers rose to fame in the 1950s as they rebelled against American culture. This rebellious generation marked the beginnings of a major cultural turning point in the United States. Headed by writers such as Jack Kerouac, William Burroughs, and Allen Ginsberg, the Beat movement infused literature with a new sense of adventure and spontaneity. The Beat Generation was a product of the times, as the emergence of this movement was closely related to the social environment of the United States in the 1950s. The end of World War II was the beginning of the Beat movement. Post-World War II, America became the wealthiest country in the nation, thus experiencing a long economic boom from 1950 to the 1970s. The middle class was growing at a high rate, 60% of people were in the middle class, and 90% of families owned TVs. For Americans at that time, eating a family dinner and watching TV every night was considered a conservative tradition. However, this all soon changed during post-World War II. People were tired of their mundane routines. They felt beaten down by the traditional lifestyle. They wanted a new way to express themselves as individuals, yet they felt restricted. They felt trapped, all because they felt pressure to conform to the perfect ideals of society. And that's when Jack, Allen, and William made their debut and stimulated the Beat movement. The Beats advocated personal liberation, purification, and illumination through the heightened sensory awareness that might be under the influence of drugs, sex, jazz, or the disciplines of Zen Buddhism. This new light in history reached the teenagers of the time who were looking for ways to get out of conforming with society. These teenagers essentially became the fundamental basis to the new generation as they broke away from their parents and defined themselves in new ways. Additionally, the Beat Generation was a time for Black artists to rise in society with their riveting music. Another important moment in this generation was the idea of intermixing white artists, white audiences, Black artists, and Black audiences all as one. Following World War II was the Cold War. There appeared to be a political force known as McCarthyism in the US. Consequently, McCarthyism caused a great commotion within society, creating a sense of terror and fear. People were extremely terrified of communists at that time, thus leading to falsely accusing communism onto other people without any evidence. Because of this fear, many people conformed to living the safe lifestyle that was highly encouraged by political figures. Following exact orders by any political figure ensured safety within the American people and thusly became a norm. Thanks to McCarthyism, fear ruled in society. Thusly, conformity ruled in society. The growing constant fear of communism and political constraints began to dominate people's lives, which led to Americans suffering from collective nervous breakdowns. The Beat Generation thus rose to break away from conformity, experimenting with drugs, exploring alternative forms of sexuality, becoming absorbed within the Eastern religious culture, and rejecting materialism were ways to distract Americans from their fears of communism, and essentially became a way to express individuality. The movement introduced new values and exposed values that were apparent in society, but people were just too scared to even talk about, like homosexuality, for example. Evidently, homosexuality was highly uncommon and frowned upon during this time. However, as the Beats attempted to revolutionize the traditional society morals, they also explored their sexualities. Ginsberg was one who questioned his sexuality, yet was conflicted with his own feelings, since the idea of loving another man was completely far away from the traditional norms of society. Needless to say, Jack Kerouac helped his friend inflame his homosexuality. Overall, the Beat Generation promoted the exploration of alternate sexualities in society. Rejecting mainstream American values, exploring alternate forms of sexuality, and experimenting with drugs and all things off the radar are things that make up the beat culture. Within their culture, the Beats use straightforward and provocative language as a new expressive technique. Due to the youth's social, political, economic, and cultural status, the means they expressed their emotions and thoughts were very restricted. So, the Beat Generation took some extreme ways to highlight their detachment from the mainstream society. Consequently, beats were illustrated into cartoon characters called beatniks to promote coffee houses and nightclubs, to sell newspapers and clothing pieces. However, through false advertising through the media, the beats were viewed as rebels, delinquents. They were feared by society. They became an image of violence and juvenile delinquents. Pertaining to religion, most beats were Buddhists, thinking that beats are both artists and foremost spiritual seekers. Their views paralleled with transcendentalist views to their understanding of the poet as a prophet. The beats were always on the road because they could not find God in the churches and synagogues. They saw human beings embedded in a vast network with other humans, with animals, and with life itself. Ultimately, the beats glorified in eliminating distinctions between matter and spirit, divinity and humanity. At the core of the beat movement were authors Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, and William Burroughs. These three are the most influential figures during the Beat Generation, since they basically were the founding fathers of the movement. They sought to instill a new vision, which involved unrestricted self-expression, psychedelic experiences as a means of perceiving truth, sexual experimentation, and the idea that art goes above and beyond traditional morals. Taking a look at some notable pieces of the Beat Generation, Jack Kerouac was the author of the best-selling book On the Road. This book describes a group of people traveling both geographically and spiritually in the country. Kerouac described a life where there was no such thing as social pressures. Kerouac transformed the literature forever through his freestyle manner of just expressing his thoughts and feelings without plan or revision. William Burroughs, also another significant figure of the Beat Generation, reveals the dark world of the drug culture in his novel Naked Lunch. Lastly, another significant figure of this literary movement was Allen Ginsberg. With his noteworthy piece, Howl, Ginsberg reveals the undeveloped part of America that exposes inappropriate topics of drug addicts, drifters, prostitutes, and swindlers, and even uses slang and foul language that shocked the public. This poem, though regarded as a disgrace of the 1950s, reflects the instinctive anger and excitement of the youth, establishing itself as the Bible of the Beat Generation and the youth culture. The Beat Generation significantly impacted America in unimaginable ways. It was because of the Beat Generation that people began to question the society they lived in and stepped out of it. The Beat Generation also set precedent for many important things such as the hippies and anti-war movement. In addition to that, their beliefs influenced musicians such as Bob Dylan, the Beatles, and Elvis Presley. It was thanks to the Beat Generation that people can now express themselves without any restrictions and without fear.